Hey everyone, welcome back to I Know a Guy. I'm Anthony, and this is the podcast where connections thrive. Each episode, we spotlight inspiring entrepreneurs, professionals, and individuals doing amazing things. Together, we'll grow your circle, spark collaborations, and discover new opportunities. Today, we're meeting Anthony Ferlan. He's a corporate real estate strategist who helps healthcare founders turn bold visions into high-functioning, patient-centered clinical spaces. With deep expertise in market analysis, project development, and design thinking, he guides organizations from concept to grand openings, ensuring real estate becomes a strategic asset for growth and impact. How you doing today, Anthony?
Really good. Thanks for having me on, Anthony.
No, I was excited to have you. You have an awesome name, so we gotta come together on that. But no, you're doing some interesting things that I had never really seen people doing, and I think there's a lot of people out there that would benefit from getting to know you. So to start off, where are you located? Where are you calling in from?
So I'm located in Boston. I've been here for about 6 years now. Grew up in southern New Hampshire, so about 45 minutes north of here. Small town, 8,000 people, and been in Boston for 6 years. Spent a little bit of time in Dallas, but Boston has always been home for me. So love it here.
I got you. Awesome. Well, you have your haunts. If you have friends coming into town that have never visited before, where are you going? What's for dinner? Sorry, let me ask that again. Where are you going? What are you doing? And what's for dinner?
Let's see. So, Boston is such a walkable city. So, like to explore restaurants, bars, some of the parks. You can get across. You can walk all the way across the city. I live in the South End, which is pretty close to downtown. You can get all the way to Fenway Park. You can get to downtown. You can get to the North End, where there's a lot of great food. So, just we like to explore. I like to explore whenever I'm here. Let's see, for dinner. So if I'm going to a classic Boston place, Grill 23, classic Boston steakhouse, been around forever, solid meal, great service, love that. And then if I'm going for like more of a, let's see, sushi vibe, there's a 10 seat sushi bar right in the South End called No Relation, and omakase, 10, 15 courses of just sushi. Like it's a good place to have fun and just, meet a bunch of other people at a sushi bar.
That's awesome. You had me with steakhouse. What's your order there? Do you have a particular cut that you prefer?
Oh, that's I like, I like a New York strip or a ribeye. Those are typically what I'm going for, with obviously some nice steak fries.
Yeah, ribeye is right there at the top. I always tell people that I always say like New York strip. I ask, have you had a picanha before? Because if you hadn't, you should. It's like a New York strip, but better in every way. So that's my advice: is give it a shot. But anyway, before we go on a tangent about steak, what can you tell us about what you do?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, my background, I've always been in healthcare real estate. I started out in the commercial real estate industry roughly 10 years ago, at a time when healthcare was becoming more outside of the hospital setting. So traditionally, a lot of healthcare systems where that's where all the real estate was. But at the time, you'd see a lot of private equity firms getting into buying up dental groups, as a good example. So these dental groups, you'd have a 10 location regional dental practice, and then a private equity firm comes in and combines 10, 20 of those, and all of a sudden there's a 200 location dental portfolio you have to manage. So where I started my career was helping those companies to understand now that you have this big portfolio, what is your real estate strategy? How do you find sites? How do you locate sites? And then ultimately, how do you manage them when they're open? I left the commercial real estate industry. I was living in Dallas at the time, ready to move back to Boston. And I, quit my job and said, "Hey, let's move back to Boston," where my wife and I met at Tufts, right around here, and found a job with a company called Iora Health. So senior focused primary care. They were building at the time. They had around 25 locations. They had grown over the first 6-7 years of the operations, and they were looking to bring in somebody on the real estate side who understood how to scale a portfolio. So I've gone from, I started doing just, 10, 15 sites a year for them, and getting to a point where, they got to 50 locations, company sold to One Medical. And then, I worked at One Medical for a little bit, but what I really love doing is the startup healthcare world. So, helping companies that have a vision, helping founders who have a vision for the care that they're going to provide, the people that they want to serve, and then helping them go from what's the idea all the way through where do we go, what do we build, how do we build it, and then how do we actually get it open and operating. And that's really been my focus now that I'm working on the consulting side. So what I found in the market is there are a lot of startups that they go and they bootstrap it. They do the real estate alone, and they get into situations where all of a sudden they have a number of locations that the financials aren't necessarily being tracked, or they don't have a really solid facility management process. So you've got staff members who need support on site, but they don't have like a centralized function to be able to support it. So where I come in, startups that have one location, two locations, from what I've seen, like they don't necessarily need a full-time real estate person, but having a person like me who has high-level real estate expertise that can help guide them along in the process to make sure that their first site meets the needs of their patients and their staff, and that it launches successfully, and then it can be managed as they continue operating it and starting to learn more about their business.
That's awesome. What is it that you love most about what you're doing now?
Oh, I love working with founders who are really mission driven. I think I've focused very heavily in high need populations. I've worked in senior care specifically, where Medicare recipients who have gone to the traditional healthcare system, which has been very transactional, whereas the groups that I've worked with build really strong relationships with patients so they can better impact outcomes. And I think my favorite part of the work is, within that is building something that the founder has in mind, like, getting to that end point where, you open the site, they see the site for the first time live, the colors, the furniture, just honestly, the look on their face is like, it's really rewarding to see like all this work that I've supported and put in, but just seeing how much their vision has come to life through all of like the feedback they've given me, everything they've thought about for a while, just seeing that come alive is really rewarding. I think the second piece is also when patients are in the facility. I've spent a lot of time in like multi-specialty care facilities for seniors who are Medicare, Medicaid. So highest risk, highest need populations tend to be in lower income areas. Just hearing from them after we're operating, like, nobody has built a facility like this for me. Like this doesn't exist in our community, and they're very thankful of like the services and the look and the feel. That is really that's what it's all about, is creating great environments for patients to get great care in. And that's something that I've been fortunate to enjoy a few times now.
Okay. You've kind of explained a lot of this already, but just like to have it all in one spot,
Mm-hmm.
what does your average client look like, or what are the pain points that somebody's going through that if they're dealing with X, Y, or Z, you're the person they should be talking to?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there's two different types of clients that I've worked with. There's I focus on the 0 to 1. So company says, I have a vision. I don't know where to put it. I don't know what to build, but I want somebody that can come and guide me along and say, okay, this is the care model. We have got a primary care model. We need X number, we have this number of providers. How many exam rooms do we need? What other services around that do we need? And then I think more importantly is, how do we build something that is compliant with state, federal regulations around the care that we're providing, and will serve the needs? So it's really, clients that have no real estate background other than, they bought a house, and a lot of founders do think that buying a house is similar to commercial real estate. And they learn quickly that it's not. And that's where I come in to say, hey, here's what you need to do to make sure that this location launches on time, on budget. So that's one bucket. I think the other bucket is companies that have gone through a period of growth and then stabilization. What I find, especially in the startup world, is companies come in and they have, part of the reason that I've started this business is companies come in, they have big eyes for growth. They want to go put 10 locations in the ground, year after year after year. Then you get into year 2, year 3, and you realize, like, we actually have to operate these things profitably. So the real estate growth side gets pulled back a little bit, and you focus on stabilizing operations, especially in a current fundraising environment where you have to be profitable to be able to raise capital effectively to continue scaling. So where I also come in is companies where they've stabilized operations. They're looking to, again, get back into growth mode, and coming in and building that growth engine where they've been able to manage the 10, 20, 30 locations that they have, but they're ready to get from 20 to 50 and likely either raising more money or likely, going for an exit. I've been able to come in, build their real estate function so that it's running professionally, running, with best practices, and then being able to actually help them find the sites, get them open, and not overwhelm the staff with the new growth that they're having.
Okay. What about power partners? What are other industries or professionals that you synergize well with, or you find of a lot of ability to collaborate or refer back and forth with?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot. Like, venture capital is a big area of growth, where like venture capital firms have different portfolio companies that they see some needing support in, groups that they've had really again, an operator that's been stable, that has maybe not been running their real estate portfolio so well, but they're ready to grow and they need me to they want me to come in. I've also found that consultants in the healthcare world who are providing different tech services, operation support, business consulting to companies. That's where I've also seen it come in, where they bring in a contract COO to be able to help them. Okay, we're going to shift from a virtual care platform to a brick and mortar model. Bring in a COO to help with the business operations side, and me coming in as a partner to take off that big real estate function, so that they can focus on how do we build a really solid care model, and I can focus on how does that care model end up in the actual space.
Okay. And you talk to a lot of new entrepreneurs and founders. So, what advice would you give to a new or an aspiring entrepreneur?
I think it's being patient with the growth of your business, making sure that you have a really clear vision on like what types of engagements you want to take on, or how you want to serve the populations you're serving, and then getting advice from other people who have done it. That would be my that's it's kind of a returning that question back. But I think talking to other entrepreneurs who have been able to grow their own business, whether it's an individual consulting practice or really a healthcare firm, just understanding how they've built their business, how they organize their time. I think, right now I'm solo. My goal is to bring on more people, but right now my time is the biggest constraint around what I'm able to provide for clients. So getting advice on how to best manage your time, what tools they're using, that has been really helpful for me as I've grown this business.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. Awesome. So, how can real estate strategy improve patient care in a healthcare facility?
I think the number one thing, the thing that a lot of people overlook on real estate strategy is the staff experience. I think with building a really efficient facility that serves the needs of the patients, but also serves the needs of the staff, is hugely important in healthcare, because in healthcare, there's such high turnover among staff. And what a lot of companies don't realize is, if you don't build an efficient facility management operation, if you don't build an efficient clinic, the team members are actually the ones that suffer, and ultimately patient care will suffer. So the example is, if you have a clinic manager who's responsible for they're responsible for organizing care, organizing schedules, working with the different care teams to make sure that all of the patients are set up for the day, make sure the clinic's operating. If you also have that person responsible for facility management and they don't have any support on that, that has like having a centralized function to say, here's how we support staff when it's operating. That's hugely important for making sure that staff feel engaged, so that they can spend their time focused on providing great care to patients. That's really what my focus is taking, founders could spend a lot of time in the weeds of commercial corporate real estate, and dealing with new sites, dealing with dealing with architects, dealing with contractors. But what they really should be focusing on is building the right care model for their patients, for the staff that are going to be serving those patients. So that's really where I come in, is saying, let me take this big amount of work off your plate so that you can build the care model that meets ultimately what you're trying to do. You're trying to improve health outcomes for people. Like, let me take off the things that are really taking away from that.
Absolutely. What would you say is the biggest mistake healthcare founders make when opening a new clinic?
I would say, I think for me, it is this is a little self-serving answer, but I think it's trying to go it alone. Trying to, working with brokers and just trusting real estate brokers. I think there's in the brokerage industry there, especially for smaller companies where the deals are quite small. You're not going to get a lot of support from the broker once that deal is done. It's not their role. Their job is to go and help you find a lease, work with you on getting it negotiated, obviously with an attorney involved. But after that, you're really on your own. So if you go into it thinking that the broker is going to do all of the planning for you, all the communication with the landlord, just like you have to be ready to actually work with those landlords, work with the different vendors that you're going to be working with to get a site open. I think underestimating the amount of work that's the biggest mistake I really see from founders.
Okay. And then how does design thinking influence the layout of a successful medical space?
So you have to really think heavily about, okay, where are the patients coming in? How are they being greeted? What is their first impression of the space? Like that's the thing for me when I look at, design, working with designers, working with architects is what is the patient experience going to be from, the time they walk in the door till the time they check out and leave? And how can you make sure that experience feels cohesive? So you want to have really, comfort is a huge thing for me. So my focus also has been non-traditional healthcare spaces within healthcare. So you think about like a hospital, very institutional feel, the plastic chairs, the hospital smell. Where my focus has been in real estate, actually healthcare real estate, has been building spaces that don't feel like hospitals, so that somebody comes in and they're not thinking about that time they broke their arm when they were a kid sitting in the emergency room. The furniture, the artwork on the walls, everything from from the time they walk in all the way, when they're sitting down, sitting in the exam rooms, making sure they don't feel as as institutional. That is, from a design standpoint, like that's how I think about it. And then making sure that the staff members can flow from the centralized nursing station to the centralized break room, whatever type of care it is, to the rooms and back, and making sure that they can actually get the work that comes from doing the patient care, making sure the space is designed around, okay, a provider needs to go and a provider is going to go meet with a patient. Well, they also have to take notes on that. So where are they going to go to do that? How do you make that comfortable? How do you make sure that they're, that it's ergonomic so that the providers, don't have their own, ergonomic issues when, when they're doing the charting that they have to do to provide great care?
Yeah, no, not something I never really thought about, but you know it when you see it. You're in a hospital, you're like, okay, this feels like every other hospital I've ever been to. But then you go to some places, you're like, oh, it's actually kind of nice, a little bit more comfortable. So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. So why you? What sets you apart from everybody else out there doing something similar?
For me, I've focused very heavily in my entire career on working with startups and understanding how executives think about real estate. Um, for most companies, real estate it's a cost center. You're paying the rent, you've got costs. Like I do spend the most money of most people, but what is the value that they're getting from that? I help them understand that how does the investment that they're making in real estate translate to value for the organization, for patients, and ultimately I understand the operations of a center much differently than a typical, let's say, a commercial real estate firm. A commercial real estate firm will provide all the services that I'm doing, but it's very transactional on that end. Most commercial real estate project managers or architects, they haven't actually worked inside of a clinic, worked with clinicians, worked with the end users. I have a really strong understanding of how the end users are working in that space and make sure that throughout the process, from the beginning, from when we start to look for spaces all the way through when it's opening, down to like what pencils are we using, what wrist guards are we putting on the desks. Like I have the understanding of how people actually use the space, so that really informs the way that I take on evaluating a vacant white box, evaluating the lines on a page that are architectural drawings, and then ultimately how the furniture and everything else fits into the space.
Yeah, I know there's a lot to this, and we could go down all the rabbit
Yeah.
holes and spend a lot more time talking about it. But in general, is there anything that I failed to ask or missed that you wanted to add?
I think for me, the reason I love doing this is um, real estate in general. When you think of real estate, either residential real estate, commercial real estate, you think of these big firms and the kind of the old school bunch of guys sitting around a room collecting checks, doing deals. But for me, the my focus on real estate is really bringing high quality care to populations that need it the most. I uh, there's more healthcare needed in this country everywhere. The healthcare system is very, very much controlled by healthcare systems and health insurers. But I think for me, I love the fact that at the end of the day, we're bringing care into neighborhoods that traditionally wouldn't get high quality care. And I love working with founders who are trying to address a really a high need population and really trying to bring really good care models to people that need it the most.
Awesome. So, for those that want to know more and have a lot of questions, how can they get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can. My website is retainedcre.com, and you can email me Anthony at retainedcre.com, or also find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to add me there.
Perfect. I'm going to put all that in the show notes so it's super easy to find. Just go click, have a conversation. Do yourself a favor, have a conversation with Anthony. He's very knowledgeable at what he does. He's the exact same in a one-to-one as he is here. So you're going to do yourself some favors by having that conversation. If anybody would like to get a hold of me, you can find me at ikag.me. You can find more episodes, subscribe to our newsletter, and connect with our growing community of awesome people like Anthony. If you or somebody you know would like to be interviewed, you can also apply on the website. But thanks so much for coming on. Like I said, I hadn't talked to anybody that does anything quite like you, and it's fascinating when you meet somebody doing something that you never really even considered before. Obviously, somebody has to do it, but seeing the passion, it's awesome. So I really appreciate you coming on. Let's all go have an awesome day and grow our circles. All right,
Thanks for having me.
my pleasure.